Hello everyone, and welcome to today's Tackling Reviews and Taking Action webinar. I'm Sydney, and I will be your host today, and I'll be moderating for the rest of the time. Thank you for joining us. Good morning and afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. A few good housekeeping tips before we get started. The audio is streaming via the web, so there is no dial-in. So please make sure your speakers are all the way turned up, or borrow a pair of headphones from a coworker if you don't have any. Please make sure all lines are muted, and please submit questions in the question pane. We'll be answering questions at the end of the webinar, so stay tuned for that. And for all you social butterflies out there, we'll be live tweeting on our hashtag at GDFORemployers, and the hashtag is #GDChat. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speakers. Today we're hosting Amy Zimmerman from Kabbage. Kabbage is a best place to work. So welcome, Amy.
Thank you.
And our very own Lisa Holden.
Hi, Sid. Thanks for being on the line, everyone, today, and thank you for that introduction. Amy, I will let you introduce yourself and tell everyone who you are today.
Okay, great. My name is Amy Zimmerman, and I head people operations for a fintech company headquartered in Atlanta. We've been around for several years, and we're having a lot of fun. We've got an office here in San Francisco, so I'm glad that I was able to join you guys here today.
Well, welcome, and congrats again on being a best place to work. That's quite an achievement, and it doesn't go unnoticed, I'm sure, when it comes to recruiting.
Oh, it's been amazing, and we certainly appreciate the recognition.
Fantastic. And hello to everyone on the line. I'm Lisa Holden, Employer Communications Manager here at Glassdoor. I've been here for about 5 years, and my role is communicating what it takes to make the most of Glassdoor. And I do that for the news, and I also do that for employers and individuals such as yourselves who are looking at Glassdoor and thinking about all the best practices that you should be taking on to make the most of your employer brand on this public platform. So without further ado, let's get into this agenda. First up, we're going to talk about why we should respond to reviews and why responding to reviews is so important. We're also going to do some best practices for responding, and that's where Amy's going to help me out here from the practitioner perspective on this one. And we'll finish with some key takeaways and hopefully leave plenty of time for Q&A. So feel free to type those questions into the box, and we'll get to them at the end. So first up, why responding to reviews is important. A bad company reputation costs the company at least 10% more per hire. And what does that mean? That means that if you have a bad reputation, you're immediately setting yourself up to be in a defensive position. Candidates are coming to you and they're saying, well, why isn't this working? And why is it so tough to work here? And why, when I look on Glassdoor or other social media sites or talk to people who work at your company, why am I hearing about all of this stuff, this bad stuff that I don't want to be a part of? And that's really hard for you to defend. And so you end up in a position where you're paying more for these candidates because they're having to take a risk by coming onto your company. So as I'm sure this isn't a secret to you that if you have a good reputation, it's possible that you'll actually have to pay candidates less because they're not coming in with all of these questions and hesitation about taking a risk working for you.
I'd say there's also a higher demand. Because of a strong reputation, we've actually probably over the last year or two, had an increase in applicants as a result of some of the accolades, the awards, the recognition that we've received. I think it's important to pay competitively, so I won't say that we take advantage and potentially pay somebody less, but the recruiting cycle is easier. The candidate quality, I think, is a lot higher, and the demand is better. By contrast, I've spoken to some recruiter friends out there who are struggling with trying to find good, strong candidates for clients of theirs because they don't have as good a reputation and or the clients don't respond to the reviews.
Right.
So a lot of times it's okay to have bad reviews if people understand where they're coming from and what your perspective is on it. So the fact that these folks are ignoring it altogether is making it really, really challenging for them to attract good people.
A little foreshadowing there by Amy Zimmerman before we get into that on how bad reviews can actually be helpful for your business. And the only other thing I'd add on this slide is think about that 10% more per hire and those resources that are going directly to those candidates who are nervous about taking a risk with you. If you were able to pool those resources and put it into actually augmenting your employer brand and making things better, using those resources to say, here, we've identified what's wrong and here's what we're going to do to fix it, that's such a better use of company time and money. So think about how you're allocating things and what you're putting towards your employer brand now and your reputation now and what you could be putting towards it in the future. The next thing I'll say is that, this is no secret. Reviews are just part of the job search today. The days of just blindly applying to a job are long gone, much like the days of picking out a new restaurant without reading a review are long gone. And candidates know that a job search is a very critical decision, and it should be. They should do as much research as they possibly can, and we find our research suggests that they are in fact doing it. Job seekers are doing this because they want to learn as much about the company before applying as possible. They don't want to waste their own time, and they don't want to waste yours either. So you as the employer are actually in a very good position if people are doing their research on Glassdoor before they're joining you, because they're self-selecting out if they find that they're not a fit. So give them that window to see what it's like to work for your company and let them do the work for you.
I think it's super, super critical that the interview process and the evaluation process is a two-way street. Hiring mistakes are so unbelievably expensive, and even when you think you've got a winner, if for some reason there's an aspect of your culture or your business that isn't a fit for them, why not give them the opportunity to know that in advance and save everybody the heartache of the mistake?
Exactly. And I know this is scary, but transparency is very critical here. And it's the notion that our business is built on. Glassdoor really seeks to empower people through transparency. We believe that information is power. And so we give people as much information as we can about what it's like to work in these companies so that they can then make better decisions that are so critical. And when we think about this on a broader scale, this isn't something that obviously that just applies to the job hunt or employment. This is something that applies, when you're buying something on the internet, you're visiting 3 websites on average before you actually make a decision about where you're going to buy that. And so it's no surprise that job seekers use 18 sources before they apply to a job. They're thinking critically. And by the way, those are the job seekers you really want. The ones who are thinking critically about the place they want to go. They are particular about doing their research, and they're truly informed candidates when they come into your company with eyes wide open. And we find, too, that every employer is also a consumer. So, looking at their peers' opinions every employee is also a consumer. So they're looking at their peers' opinions before they are making these critically important decisions.
This is one of my favorite parts of what you guys are about, the transparency. And transparency is a core value at Kabbage. It's something that is incredibly important to us. We have actually a weekly town hall where we're super transparent about everything going on, from investor stuff to partners to clients to all kinds of different things that we share with the entire company every single week. And so we're huge fans and proponents of the idea of transparency. And so one of the things I love, which again to your point can be scary, is that people get to learn about us before they ever come on. Because if that's not a thing that they're comfortable with, then they're not going to be happy in an environment like ours. And as I mentioned earlier, it's super important. Making hiring mistakes are so expensive. And so for people to know in advance of coming in what we're about and what they can expect, it's hugely beneficial. And I'm grateful because there's few places where people can go to really learn those things other than a platform like yours.
Right. Well, I appreciate you saying that. And do you think that there are ever times when, a candidate comes in and they might be a great fit for the organization, but there's something about the culture that's not going to work for them long term, and do they ever walk away?
Absolutely. We've actually had that happen, not often, because most people come in and they're like, oh my God, I'm in love with this place. There's nothing like it in Atlanta. This is where I want to be. But conversely, people who are really self-aware might look around and go, this looks amazing, but it's really not a fit for me. Maybe they're used to a lot more structure because they come from larger environments. Maybe the collegial environment makes them uncomfortable, so they prefer something with a little more, I think I said structure already, but the structure and the more formalities because we're pretty casual. So it can be for any number of reasons, but it's really, really an important thing to identify early on because it's way more painful later.
Absolutely. It's more painful, it's more expensive, and for those companies that have that high level of structure and formality, they're probably grateful to get that candidate in the door, and that candidate is grateful to be there. So it's about finding the right fit and giving opportunity for that. So how do you actually do it? How do you join this conversation, and why? If I can have everyone on the line take away one thing from this webinar, it's a reminder that candidates do not demand perfection. They expect transparency and authenticity. So, we know that 65% say their perception of a company improved after seeing an employer respond to a review. And that does not mean their perception improved when they saw a good response. They saw a response that resonated with them. The action of responding was enough to improve their perception of your company because it signals to job seekers that you're engaged, you're authentic, and you're willing to take responsibility for what's going right and what's going wrong. And that is a huge signal to candidates that you're typically to candidates that you're a place they want to be. And it gives them so much more insight to your company tone and voice. When I think about this, something that I always keep in mind when Glassdoor is responding to our own reviews on Glassdoor, not to get too meta, is that this response isn't just for the person who wrote the review. The response is also for everyone reading the review. And it's a signal to candidates across the internet of who we are.
For me, I couldn't agree more. For me, I think about the way we care. Another one of our core values is caring deeply. And even if I disagree with what was written, and certainly that's happened before, I have to remind myself not to get defensive because it's not about responding and being right. It's about caring, and it's about showing the community, and the community being the broader community on Glassdoor, and future candidates that may or may not be interested in applying for a job with Kabbage, who are curious about what our position might be on a situation. I try not to make it personal, or certainly take it personally, but I think more broadly about the audience when I respond to reviews and less about the individual. And the other thing I do is tie it back to our values. I mean, almost every single response we make ties back to our values and why we do things a certain way. I try to be specific as well because I think it's important that you actually address the review when possible. But when addressing the review will create a level of defensiveness, I hope I take the high road and I make it more about our values and our environment so that at least the audience gets something out of it if the individual who wrote it didn't.
Right. As a communications professional, I have to applaud you for doing that. I think I sometimes look at how Kabbage responds to reviews when I'm stuck thinking about how to respond to a review myself. And I think, and you hit on a couple of things that are so important, which is A, mapping it back to your company's values, because that gives you a framework to have a consistent message. And so you can respond to things you disagree with or negative things with, hey, here's our perspective on that, and we're sorry that you had a poor experience with us. That wasn't our intention. That's not what we want. And here are the things we are aiming for. And that allows you to come from a very authentic and real place where you can really speak to your values and say, hey, I own this, and this is why we are the way we are, and we're sorry it wasn't a fit. I think being concise is another important thing, and simply saying thank you. Feedback, positive or negative, is a gift, and it's hard to give sometimes. And so if someone took the time, best thing to do is start with thank you, map it back to your overall company message, and keep it brief. So how do we do this? Lisa, what is step one on my journey to start responding to reviews? The first thing you need is a free employer account on Glassdoor. So simply go to glassdoor.com/employers and follow the prompts to get your free employer account. We'll ask you a couple questions to make sure you're in a position to speak on behalf of your organization, and then you're in. And with that free employer account, you can do things like flag reviews, respond to them, and take a look at back-end company analytics. So let's get into our best practices once you have that free employer account and you're actually getting ready to start responding to reviews. And the first one is be authentic. We hit on this, right? But it's important to be courteous, professional, succinct, and appreciative. And mapping back to that idea of authenticity, if candidates are reading your responses to disgruntled employees and they're seeing a copy-paste situation, they smell a robot. We're in a transparent world today. People know how reviews work. And if you're copy and pasting a response, you might as well not do it.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, that's the authentic piece, the transparency piece. I think we've hit on all of those things. But really being direct and letting people know that you're reading, you're responding, you care about what they have to say, even if you disagree. You know, by responding to a review, I don't think you're necessarily accepting that what the person is saying is necessarily fact. I think that what you're doing is you're acknowledging that somebody took the time to give the review, and hopefully you learn from it. And even if they're 1,000,000% wrong, you're taking the opportunity to let the world know how you handle those types of situations. And I think that will resonate a lot with future candidates.
Exactly. The purpose of Glassdoor is to give people a place to share their opinion about what it's like to work somewhere. And that means everyone's entitled to their opinion, both the employee who had the experience and the employer. So we give you the opportunity to be authentic. The next tip is don't get overwhelmed. And here's where I want to talk a little bit about how negative feedback can actually be a positive for your business. So it's upsetting to get negative feedback, particularly when you're in a position where some of that negative feedback could be directly about work that you've done or the company that you've been with for a long time. And it can feel really upsetting to get that. But the important thing is don't let it deflate you. I mean, negative feedback is actually more helpful than positive feedback because it gives you what's not working, and those should be opportunities. You can say, we should add more resources to this, or we should take some time to figure out this issue. And that, going through that exercise actually helps you frame your response because you're able to say, we acknowledge that this isn't working, and here's what we're doing to fix it. That's a huge signal to candidates too, like, hey, we're not perfect. This is a journey we're on, and here's our next step to make this thing better.
And that you're willing to accept the feedback. You know, a lot of times companies aren't willing to listen. Or there's a perception that they aren't willing to listen. So signaling for folks that you are working on things and that you are willing to listen and respond is pretty huge, even when things are broken. For me, I think being thoughtful is what it's all about, and also breathing. Not responding when you're emotional. It can be very personal, as you mentioned. I've definitely been in that position because when you love where you are, and, you know, to me it's that whole, you know, I can criticize my kid to help them learn and get better, but you can't. So nobody wants to hear about the blemishes and the things that don't work when they're feeling personal. So separating yourself from that and breathing and maybe taking a day to sleep on, you know, what the feedback was and how you want to thoughtfully respond has been certainly helpful for my team. The other thing that I think is really important is that you have a feedback tool at the company other than the public stuff. So not, you know, no offense to Glassdoor because I think it's an amazing forum and it's hugely beneficial for a million reasons, but I think we'd be remiss if it was the only tool we used for feedback. Now, for former employees, it winds up being one of the few tools that they have, but for current employees, we have a quarterly engagement survey that we collect data and feedback on, and we also have an anonymous email loop so that if somebody is frustrated, they can talk to us about it confident or anonymously before they potentially go publicly so that we can hopefully address it before it becomes a bigger thing. So I think that's the other thing that's really important is having multiple forums for folks.
Absolutely. I mean, some people are okay sharing this kind of feedback publicly, and some would prefer a more private forum. So giving people enough tools to share the feedback is really critical. And we do that here at Glassdoor too. We know the value of our platform and our service, and we certainly drink our own champagne. But we also recognize that sometimes you should give people the opportunity to share things one-on-one, also anonymously or internally. So we have internal survey mechanisms that we use as well. Our next tip is enlist your team. So this is not a situation that you should go alone. When you think about who's responsible for monitoring the Glassdoor reviews, you should also think about who's responsible for actually responding. So if it's you on your team that's making sure that the reviews that come in are being addressed, you should be reaching out to your CEO, to your executives of certain departments to say, hey, this came in about the finance team. I think it's the CFO's job to respond to this. A, because it signals to that person that there's some feedback about their department, and B, it signals to the candidates reading the response that the head of this department is engaged and is doing what they need to hear feedback and make things better. And so what we do here at Glassdoor is we have set our alerts, which you can do with a free employer account to make sure that anytime a fresh review comes in, you see it right away. And then we alert the department head and work with them on our response.
We do the exact same thing. I've got alerts set up. I also check. I have the Glassdoor app on my phone, and it's one of my, wake up in the morning, check email, check Glassdoor. Because we get reviews so frequently, which is pretty amazing, I check it daily because I want to be on top of where we are. Do we have good stuff coming in? Do we have bad stuff coming in? And kind of prepare for what I need to be thinking about and how I need to be responding. And we do engage. We want to make sure, A, the department that was mentioned potentially gets the feedback, but also want to engage them in how they want to respond to it. So it's a really important part of how you handle the situation, and to me it's part of the culture. It speaks to how much you value feedback at the company, and that's the signal for future candidates that I think is super critical.
And by the way, this is also a chance for you to get a little bit of visibility at your own organization. I mean, if you're going to executives with recommendations about what they should say on behalf of the company, it's a great opportunity to partner with your communications or PR team and say, hey, let's work on crafting a message here for our CEO and getting some face time with those execs to say, here's our recommendation based on what's critical for our brand. So it's a chance for you to grow as an individual as well. Next up, tip number 4 is be timely. Something that works really well is developing a cadence for checking the reviews. I mean, Amy, you mentioned every morning. I think that's great. If every morning is overwhelming, set a time once a week, depending on how many reviews you have coming in. But setting that time will allow you to kind of benchmark this and make sure that you're keeping up with it rather than seeing it when it's too late and you have 100 reviews to respond to, and you're just wondering how to go back or which ones to prioritize.
It also gives you the opportunity to respond real time. For example, I got one this morning. It took me 3 seconds to read. It was a couple lines. It was really nice, which was great, so it'll be an easy response, but it literally took me 3 seconds. If it was a 30-minute investment every morning, it probably wouldn't be part of my daily rhythm. But for 3 quick seconds to just jump in, take a quick look, and then cruise out, I don't respond, in the moment. So that's not part necessarily of what I'm doing. It's just a quick check-in because it's a priority for me and for my team.
Absolutely. And I do want to touch when we talk about timing. I think we live in a feedback-rich culture today, and we're all expected to have our phones in our pockets at all times and respond to email around the clock. But sometimes a review comes in that's pretty upsetting, and you can't respond in the moment because you're too upset. And something I like to tell employers is if it feels good to respond, stop and take a minute because the value of giving it a day, letting yourself calm down, and coming from a thoughtful place where you can genuinely speak on behalf of your company and stay on message is really important. So be timely, but respect that time can help you calm down when needed.
No doubt. That defensiveness, in my mind, it might feel good coming out, but it will completely kill the perception others have in terms of what they're reading and how the company, and it's the company's reputation that you're representing by doing that. So taking that time is really, really important.
Very critical. And allow for flexibility. I mean, there's going to be times when, your cadence gets a little off and you don't respond to any reviews that day or that week. And then there's going to be periods of rapid hiring when you're encouraging employees to write reviews and there's a ton of content coming in and you're going to be logging in 2 or 3 times a day even. So allow yourself that flexibility when it comes to determining a cadence that really works for you.
for us, I can say that it's become an important part of our employer brand. And so we do a number of things that we encourage folks to participate in, and this is one of them. One of the things that we love is when we get feedback from candidates that are interviewing about their experience for a couple of reasons. One, we hope that it's a great one. We always want a candidate leaving Kabbage wanting to work for Kabbage. We always want that decision to be ours. And when their experience is an awesome one, we know we're in the driver's seat. Number one. Number two, it's sharing that experience with other folks who come in and they're like, this is the best experience I've ever had. I've never had more fun at an interview. This is awesome. So it's really important. And so sharing kind of both sides of that is part of our strategy. But we do ask and encourage employees, and by the way, we've got negative stuff out there, so it's not like we're telling them or expecting what we want to hear, what we hope they'd hear, what we hope we would hear from them. Certainly we have that. But people are authentic, and if their experience isn't awesome, they're sharing it. But we are encouraging people to share it regardless of what it is.
Right, right. And I want to talk a bit about what you do with all of that content. Once you've encouraged people to share it and there it is, it's important to implement that feedback loop because you've worked so hard to say, please guys, tell us how it really is, share this feedback on Glassdoor, this is so helpful to our employer brand, and then what do you do with it? You implement this feedback loop where you're able to say, I've collected all of the ratings and reviews that we've gotten over the past 6 months, the last quarter, the last year, and now I'm able to pick out these trends and see what's working, what isn't, and sharing that across your organization, another opportunity for you to get a little bit of visibility, and also make some strategic recommendations about where to put your resources and what to do next. And so if you're doing all of that back-end work to get all of this data in the door and then doing all of the work to respond to it so people are seeing that kind of flywheel turning, the next step is really implementing change and using the data that you've collected, that you're now an expert on, to make those recommendations. Absolutely.
It's a critical part of how we determine what we need to address and where the opportunities are to be better. In addition to the engagement surveys that we use where we get quarterly feedback, we always integrate our Glassdoor feedback. I would say we act on it fairly real time because it's really important stuff, but when we have bigger projects, we always use the data as inputs into how we prioritize what we work on.
Absolutely. And you might be saying to yourself, wait a minute, I can ask for reviews? Yes, you can. It's tip number 7. If you have a free employer account, you can actually log into the Glassdoor Employer Center, and with the click of a couple buttons, you can set up an email that we've already generated for you that very quickly explains what Glassdoor is and encourages employees to respond to it. So just slot in the various email addresses you use for your workforce, and you can send that out. And we highly encourage that. What we discourage is incentivizing reviews. We believe that that can breed inauthentic reviews, and so we don't allow that. If we see that that's happening, we will take the reviews off our site. But keep in mind that you can and should encourage employee feedback all the time, whether it's every quarter, once a month, or by department or team. We recommend doing it at the onboarding stage to get that interview feedback in the door when someone first joins, and then maybe 90 days on the job or review cycles. Another great time to encourage employee feedback is on each individual employee's work anniversary, because you're able to say, hey, congrats, you've been here a year, we noticed, we're glad you're here, and hey, let us know how we're doing too, and share a review on Glassdoor. So those are just a couple of the ways that we tend to encourage companies to do it. Amy, what do you do?
That's actually really helpful insight for us as well. I like the idea of celebrating the anniversary, and if you wouldn't mind sharing what your experience has been, that would be really awesome. So I'm going to steal that.
Great.
Thank you. We usually encourage people if there was if they're in a new role, some sort of transfer internally, whether it was promotion or just some sort of lateral type of move. If there are company-sponsored events that they participated in that they might have enjoyed or have feedback in general, and even if they didn't enjoy. But when there are things that are happening, and it's very casual. I didn't even know about the feature where you could have people, send stuff out to have people do it. So it's not even something we've been using, but we've been more subtly and casually just encouraging folks to share as often as they're willing to, because we're constantly looking to recruit new people, and my pitch is always, if you want to work with more rock stars like you, help us make recruiting easier by sharing your experience.
Absolutely. And, well said. Quite articulate. I think I would take notes on that if I were on the line. All right, so let's wrap it up with some key takeaways. What did we learn today? Authenticity is so important. Be authentic in your responses or don't bother at all. As you build your team, ask for help here. Partner with communications, partner with executives to make sure that this isn't solely on you. You're in a position to monitor and you're in a position to make recommendations, but this should be something that the entire team cares about, that executives care about, because it is affecting them. It is affecting the hires that you bring in, which affects how well your business runs. Implement a feedback loop. You're an expert on the Glassdoor data, and so share it with your execs and make smart recommendations about what to keep doing, what to change. And finally, ask for reviews. You're in a position to encourage employees to share feedback, so we encourage you to do that. Now, I'll kick it back over to Sydney to find out what questions we can answer.
First of all, I want to thank both of our speakers here today. Thank you both for joining us. That was an amazing webinar. And do want to let everyone know on the line that you will be receiving a copy of the slides as well as a recording of this webinar to your inbox after the conclusion of the webinar. So please look out for that. The first question I want to start off with is, if you're new to Glassdoor and you realize your company has bad reviews that are 6 months to 2 months old, do you respond?
I would say for us, absolutely. I think, again, showing folks that you care and that you're reading, and even if you're late to the game, you can even acknowledge, oh my gosh, we didn't realize, we're just seeing this, and then give a perspective. And if it's dated, talk about what you've done to improve what the feedback was and why it no longer applies. And if it still applies, you might acknowledge that you've made some progress, but it's a work in progress and you're committed to it. But I definitely think it's never too late, and I think people will appreciate that.
I have nothing to add. That's exactly what I recommend to employers. You could do my job.
We have another one. Love the anonymous feedback loop. How do you create that?
How do you create that? So when it comes to the anonymous feedback loop, what I mean by this is you're already doing all of this work, ideally. You're encouraging employee feedback. You're reading the reviews as they come in and really ingesting them. Before you can respond, you have to really read the review, hear what the person is saying, and think about what your response is. So as you do that work, you're becoming an expert in your own employer brand in the eyes of those who know best, the employees. And so disseminating that knowledge across your organization is incredibly powerful. And we have lots of tools to help you with this. So when you log into your free employer account, you can sort the reviews by those that don't have a response yet. That can make it a little bit easier for you to kick through them. And you can also look at company-specific analytics. One thing that we offer is keyword clouds that pull out the most commonly used keywords in the pros section of reviews and compare them to the most commonly used words in the cons section. And so you're able to very quickly see, hey, we're getting a lot of people talking about our awesome work-life balance, but people are complaining quite a bit about management. And that's something you can take to your exec team and say, we need to invest in management training and make sure that people don't lose their work-life balance once we put all this management training in place. And those kinds of opportunities really show that you know what you're talking about, and we want to set you up for success as you're making those recommendations. So that is essentially what I mean by the feedback loop.
Where can you find the Ask for Reviews feature you discussed within the Employer Center dashboard to send emails to internal employees?
Let's see if I can do this in my head. Click on, you're going to go to your company profile, and then once you have a free employer account, you'll see a button in the top right for admin. Click on that, and you'll be able to go into your Employer Center. And then there's a button on the left for Manage Reviews, and scroll through that, and you'll find the text box that will open up, and you just slot your email aliases into that.
Nice. And how can I encourage people to leave reviews if we're a small company? Some people are afraid of transparency.
Absolutely. It's scary. I can understand that. If you're at a company with just a few people, you're like, well, I don't want to put head of PR because that's just me. Everyone knows who I am. And Glassdoor recognizes that. I mean, we want individuals who share feedback on Glassdoor to share as much or as little identifying information as they're comfortable with. So if it's anonymous employee, that's fine. If it's your title and whether or not you're a current or former employee, where you're located, those pieces of information are great, but they're not required. Would you add anything to that when you encourage people?
I was going to say the same thing. I mean, it doesn't require that you put even what your role is.
Yeah.
So being able to just put anonymous employee, there can be 3, and unless somebody understands exactly how you speak or how you write, they're not going to be able to pick you out.
Yep. Another tip I might offer too on this front is really get the buy-in of your exec team on this, because if you are having your department heads leaving reviews on Glassdoor, that's such a signal that this is encouraged, that it's okay, and that you won't be the first one.
Kind of just leading right into that, someone wants to know, how do you get executive buy-in to handle negative and positive reviews?
Well, I mean, I should let you take this. You're the practitioner here.
To me, it's all about the values. I hate that I keep beating everybody over the head. I mean, almost anybody I talk to, both internally and externally, I always come back to the values. But at the end of the day, if the company that you work for cares about its people, and for us, that's one of our values, then they want to hear the feedback. I would actually say that you're doing yourself and the company a disservice if you ask for the feedback and the executive team doesn't want to hear it. Mm-hmm. Because I've been doing almost for 20 years a thing I call culture sessions, where I would take a pulse when I was at a much smaller company to get feedback, and it was always anonymous when I shared it with the executive team. But I always caution when I coach companies, newer companies, on doing that. Be careful what you ask for, because if you ask, people will really share. And if you ask and do nothing with that data, then you should have never asked to begin with. So asking for the feedback is really, really critical, only if you're committed to doing something about it.
Absolutely. And well said. When it comes to winning over executives, data is really key. And so if you're asking for that feedback and you're consolidating it and you're presenting them with one page of data on, here's our Glassdoor company rating, here's how many reviews we got in the last quarter, here's how our rating has changed over time, and these are the 3 key themes that we are killing it with, and here are the 3 biggest areas we can improve, that's the kind of thing that they can easily digest and have no choice but to agree with you on. You've done your homework and you've brought to them the problem. If they choose to ignore it, that's a bad leader.
Under what circumstances do you remove a review? What protection does a company have under disgruntled former employees leaving damaging reviews with false information?
Sure. So Glassdoor takes our data collection process extremely seriously. The reviews are our bread and butter here, and we want to make sure that this content is moderated so that only the reviews that we approve that meet our community guidelines actually end up on the site. So we do that through a 2-touch process. Everything goes through a technical review, and if at any point a flag is raised, it actually gets kicked over to our team of human moderators who take another look at it. And they are comparing the review to our community guidelines, making sure that it meets our standards before it's published on the site, and they make a call from there. And this is a real process. I mean, we have an entire team devoted to this, and they actually end up rejecting 5 to 10% of the content because it doesn't meet our strict guidelines for publication. And beyond that, if there's ever a review on Glassdoor that you think doesn't meet our guidelines, that you don't believe should be public, you are free to flag that, and when you hit that flag button, it goes directly to our team of moderators who take another look.
I can add that we've done that 3 times, and had to accelerate, I don't know what the technical term is, the challenge process, but in the end you guys did agree that they were 3 that had either proprietary information or didn't meet the community guidelines upon a couple different reviews, and they were removed. But by the way, they're not going to remove reviews that you just disagree with or that aren't nice, because that defeats the purpose of what it's about. So accepting that you may agree to disagree with somebody who's disgruntled and dealing with how to respond to it is really the only choice that you have in that case.
Absolutely. Well said. Yeah, we believe everyone has the freedom to their opinion. And so if it's opinion-based, that does meet our guidelines. But there are certainly circumstances where we're happy to take another look and make sure that it meets our guidelines. That's what we want. We want quality reviews that help people everywhere find jobs and companies they love.
And one last question. I'm actually going to take this one. Is there like a paid service that we can use to help us more with this? There are actually a lot of free resources on glassdoor4employers.com. If you go to our resources tab, please feel free to explore all the ebooks and templates we have. We actually have responding to review templates that I think are really helpful and can help employers get started and just give you ideas on ways you can make this work for your company.
I will add to that too that if you are looking for extended services, if you'd like to enhance your Glassdoor profile with all of the great messaging and material that's in places like your careers page, and sponsor your jobs on Glassdoor so that they're hitting the 47 million unique users who are coming to our site monthly, you're more than welcome to hit that button on the page, Talk to Sales, and we'll walk you through that process as well.
Awesome. Well, thanks, folks. Thank you all for joining us, and hope that you can join us for our next webinar. Again, a reminder that you will be receiving the full presentation, recording, and slides after the conclusion of the webinar. So look out for that later on this week. Thanks again for joining us, and have a good day.